So my name is Kathy Basher. I would like to welcome everyone to Mental Health Monday. Be as now Yavapai and the Northern Arizona Coalition put this on every month. So I get the honor of introducing the speaker, and she's already anxious. She's afraid of what I'm going to say, but I need to share kind of on a very personal level about Dawn Reynolds, who I met about 18 years ago. My life has never quite been the same. Our paths have intermingled and gone many different directions over the years. And what I have found with Dawn is the steady and steadfast adherence to the principles of peer support and kindness and just a way of life. And during our careers, she's been extremely supportive of me. I found myself in many difficult situations during my career, and Dawn has been there one way or another to support me. Um, she was the national representative with SAMHSA. And that's one of the areas that I met her. I think that was in San Francisco. We also went to Michigan together. And I'll never quite understand, but we were there and it was more substance abuse. And as we're getting on the bus to go to the airport, there's all these peers out there and they want Dawn to come outside and talk to them. And I never knew they were really mad because in those days, substance abuse and mental illness, that it didn't jive. And so Dawn and I did not go out of the bus because they looked very angry, and we went on and got onto the airplane. But I'm excited to have Dawn speak today because during her career um, she has moved up in the system. But during that time, she has kept the true values of what peer support is and what a peer and working in the system is all about. And so I'm really looking forward to your presentation, Dawn, and I'm going to turn this over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. Boy, you're right. When I think over these past 18 years, it's sometimes hard to believe some of the things that we've faced. Hi, everybody. I'm from United Healthcare. I'm the OIFA administrator here, and part of what I want to talk about today is peers and leadership. And in order for me to do that and do it justice, I have to just briefly touch on a little bit of my personal history. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and the inner city where I grew up, it was very volatile. We never knew if when we were walking down the street if something would trigger someone and a fight would break out to being in large crowds and people getting shot. These are things that we lived with daily, and I never realized how I was taught in my family to, be tough. And my father was Italian, and he would always say, you're Italian, you're, strong Italian woman. And so I grew up in a real kind of tumultuous, not only area, but time in Detroit. In the 60s, we had race riots, and I really grew up in the, early 70s. So it was still really conflicting. And I'm saying all of this so that you know that, oh, yeah. So the acronym, thank you, Andrew. Acronyms for OIFA are the Office of Individual and Family Affairs. This is a office, and I'll talk about the work that we do a little bit later, but that's really how I met Kathy in California. But I just don't want to divert yet from a little bit of the history that helps you understand why I'm a peer, and that you're welcome, and that I didn't know I was a peer. So dealing with violence and around every corner and in my home, it kind of create a sense of just keep pushing through. Just keep pushing through. And it wasn't until I came to Arizona and really a 20 plus year marriage ended and other things occurred that I went into treatment and realized that I've had a lifelong struggle with extreme anxiety and not being able to communicate about it. Um, and so, as a peer, when I came into the OIFA, the Office of Individual and Family Affairs, Kathy Basher was the bureau chief over all of Arizona in that office. And that office really primarily was to protect individuals who had mental health challenges and illness, and really to ensure that their rights, that their services, that their families were all, that their voice was honored throughout the entire state. There was a lot of front end work that these individuals did, kicking down doors, really advocating for peers. They really had to fight the system and set it up for what we see today. And I know that there's a lot of us that think, gosh, we have it, we still have to fight. And to some degree, we do. We definitely don't want to go backward. But there was so much work on the front end that was done for peers in Arizona. And one of the biggest pieces that was accomplished for peers was to try to create and level set an opportunity throughout Arizona for individuals who have mental illness and substance use, to be able to be treated with respect and be able to have their voice in their services, and also become a part of the system to use the experiences that they had to help support others. And the premise of the Office of Individual and Family Affairs is that we are a bridge, or what I call a conduit. So we're that safe place because we all have lived experience, either as a peer or a family member. We're that safe place for individuals that we serve to come and share what's going on. We remove barriers to care. We serve those that are in the system and their families, ensuring that their rights are honored, that their voices are heard, that we're there advocating for them every step of the way. So wherever OIFA is and wherever OIFA serves, that's really the mission of OIFA, as I was taught by Kathy, and that I still adhere to where I work. And so um, I'm going to transition just a little bit now that I've explained some foundational pieces. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about is being a peer and growing up into agencies. And I was receiving services in these same agencies, became employed in the system, went into these agencies. And one of the first things that I encountered when I came into the system to receive services was a resistance to see me as an individual. There was a mentality of those that worked in the system, and this might sound harsh for, and if you're a provider, please don't take this information personally, but there was a resistance to even look me in the eye when I would go in to start my appointments. And so as a peer, we often face stigma. And there's a lot of different types of stigma, and I'm not going to, get into all the different types. But one
Dawn,
of the large,
Dawn, this is
yeah,
Lori. I just want to add something to what you're saying about the stigma and people not looking you in the eye. I was working at a community behavioral health home when peers were brought on board to work side by side with the staff and become a staff member. And there was a them and us culture that was it was very evident. And to be working, it was early in my career. But to see how different staff reacted, and still many years later, there's still some that have that them and us. To me, well, I don't want to go down a bunny trail, but I'm just acknowledging what you're saying. It was very real. Language had to change when you were doing staffing, and then you had folks that are receiving and providing services, have the lived experience in the room with the case managers, the psychiatrists. Language became more respectful, but it took a minute, and still there's room for growth. But I just wanted to say I was there when some of that change
Mhm.
started.
Thank you, Lori. And I agree. And this is very, very important piece of this is that when peers started working in the system because of that, uncomfortable in your own skin feeling, or the dismissive, mindset because you're also receiving services. How can you be working, in the system? Because of that, what peers ended up doing was kind of becoming, glued to one another. And they found their strength in building a peer community. And within that community, what we saw was then there was a flip that occurred with the peers. So initially, as peers started coming in, and especially, myself, as we started coming in and offering services, what ended up happening was that the peers began to get aggressive and began to say, well, you're clinical, like it's a bad word. You're clinical, so you don't really know what we know, and we can reach deeper levels. And so then there was a combative relationship that started to occur. And the pain point, and I just really want to stick with this part of the conversation for a moment, is the pain point that occurred was now we have division rather than cohesive collaboration. We have division. And that division got wider and wider as the peer community grew. And what we started seeing was not just the resistance from individuals who were not peers, family members, clinicians, those that were kind of on the fringe of working within the system, but not necessarily involved in the peer community. We started seeing some really aggressive behaviors towards all of the professionals from the peers. And we started hearing things like, they don't understand us. We're going to do this our way. How dare they ask us to become more professional? I'm a peer. I'm not going to. And so we started seeing a lot of resistance in kind of building that bridge. And it was harmful. It was harmful for both sets of individuals. And the reason it was harmful is because it created a division when the member, the individual who needs those services, needs us all. They need us all. And so, because of that division, we started seeing some, responses on both sides that were inappropriate. I can tell you, I remember um, coming in, not to the current organization I'm in, it was an organization prior to this one. And I remember sitting and hearing somebody talking to a new individual, and within that organization they would walk the new person around and introduce them to everybody. And I heard her say, okay, we're coming up to those people that are peers, and that means they're all mentally ill, so just say hi. And so then on the side of the peers, we would have, well, we're going to go into the clinicians now. They think they know everything, and so it was just so disrespectful and really not productive that we started seeing a breakdown. And so peers ended up being relegated in behavioral health providers to, okay, we've got peer supports in our provider agency. There's people who need food boxes. Let's get the peers to do that. You know, we've got peers in our agency, so let's get them doing, you know, the out in the lobby greeting people and telling their stories so people stay calm. And we started seeing this kind of development within employment that regulated people to a box of what others felt they could do and would never allow sort of those next steps or career ladder to develop. Um, and and unfortunately for peers, a lot of agencies started ascribing to that, or yeah, ascribing to that. And this is why, and this is key. Because when we are hostile individuals and still struggling in our recovery healthcare journey, we isolate people from us. I don't care if you're a peer, a family member, or a clinician. When we become hostile and angry, and let me tell you, there's very few people that were more angry than I was because that's the way I grew up. So when you're angry and hostile and you begin to lash out, you isolate others from being able to work effectively with you. As a peer, we maintain our identity, but we don't necessarily have to maintain where we are in that moment forever. In other words, we can grow and we can mature and we can engage and we can collaborate and we could benefit others with greater, deeper, wider communities that we're in. And so we have to consider that there's two sides to every, or actually three, to every story that we have. And we don't necessarily have to go through this struggle alone. I can tell you, I watched my dear friend Kathy, who was my leader at the time, in a very hostile environment. She was assumed if something went wrong, if there was a threat that occurred within the building, Kathy was the first one they looked at. They'd come and talk to Kathy, and she'd be like, "I don't even know what's happening." If there was a confrontation and there was a disagreement, it was almost always Kathy's fault, regardless of who was involved or what had occurred. I watched it with my own eyes. There was judgment and prejudgment and assumptions being made because Kathy is a peer, and Kathy also is authentically herself wherever she is. And so if she's struggling, if she doesn't like something, if she loves something, and everything in between, you're going to know. Here's what happened though. Because Kathy was treated that way, every peer around her was also treated that way. So as a peer in leadership or even entering in to other positions or trying to grow, we have to be careful that we recognize our effects. Yes, Marlo. I know it happens to all of us, but we have to recognize it for what it is. Are we affecting those around us that are uneducated? And what is our role in educating? I got to tell you, Kathy, do you want to say anything about that? Because your experience was, it was very, very extensive on multiple levels over years. Any comments?
Well, it was, as you're talking, I'm just remembering, and there was times where I had no idea what was going on, and at one time my supervisor was the head of the health department, and she actually had a security guard come in, and she said from now on he's going to be here during supervision. And I found out months later, after I'd been put on leave, that someone was writing threatening letters and they set it up to look like me. And I didn't even know what was going on. So, there was people. Oh, there was also when my team moved into the health department, they put us together, which we had been asking for. And all of a sudden, everyone asked to be moved. And I said, well, why? People don't want to be near us. They said, you guys can't be trusted. And
Yeah.
it just went on, but it was even, and I'll just say this one thing, that even today there was things that happened, and I've gone to the people that were impacted, and one was Mike Sheldon, who now heads the state hospital. And he thought that I was doing all these things, and I went up to him just recently when we were at the governor's office. He says, "Oh no, Kathy, I knew you didn't ever do that." And I said, "Well, how did you know?" And he said, "I hired a detective." And I said, "Well, Mike, did you tell the community? Did you tell anyone else you knew I didn't do it?" And he never did. So it
Yeah.
left a stain.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Kathy.
thank you, Kathy. And Andrew, you have your hand up if you want to unmute.
My name's Andrew. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Dagote She Inde, Andrew Ecker Yinishe, Adona Enishinigi A, Inde Nishe, Irish Bashachin, Inde Dashache, German Dashanalia, Kote Goei Tishli A, Portland, Oregon, Yinisha, Shema A, Kathy Lindsay Woye, Shaza A, Del Ecker Wole. My name's Andrew Ecker, my mother, Kathy Lindsay, my father, Del Ecker. My mother's mother, Elba Gallegos, Apache woman from New Mexico. Although my ancestral lines go back to the Madera Valley of Texas and Chihuahua, Mexico. My mother's father, Leroy Lindsay, my father's mother, Evelyn Beatty, an Irish woman from Pennsylvania. My mother's father, Leroy Lindsay, a Korean and Vietnam War veteran, and my father's father, Wayne Ecker, a World War II veteran. So I wanted to share, I think what you're talking about here is, and I'm a peer and I'm also a recovery coach, and I have 23 years of recovery. And both my parents died of drug-related causes. Mom from a cocaine overdose and my father from cirrhosis of the liver. I have a state and federal number. Both my parents were incarcerated. My mother's mother was in institutions for mental health concerns as well. So 3 generations of survivor, the institutional healthcare system. So what I wanted to share is there's always been an us and them in this culture. And I believe that the idea of that barrier is systemic. And what you're talking about is something that needs to have training in order to navigate. And I was just wondering if that is something that United Healthcare and any of these other organizations are looking at, how we begin to navigate the idea of us and them. I grew up in a generation where dare cops were getting kids to turn in their parents for smoking cannabis.
Right.
This idea of like how we're going to navigate generations of situational and systemic trauma, and it related to the system, because I know myself, in learning to be a voice and an advocate for mental health, there's a lot of resistance to what I do, because I do a recreational drumming experience. And, that vehicle of SAMHSA has an evidence-based practices portal, but you can look at it and you can see that there's a lot of vacancy there. And I think a lot of this stuff is cultural, and a lot of this stuff really needs to be spoke to. So just sharing that with you, and I'll go ahead and turn off here to listen to the response.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I'm always interested in training and have worked extensively in providing training, especially to peer supports. And thankfully, we have our Peer and Family Career Academy and other OIFAs on the line. So it's definitely something that we can talk. I'd like to talk with Kathy and Lori a little bit further about it. But thank you so much for sharing. Where I really wanted to get to with that segment of this talk was that we've experienced systematic, really, emotional verbal abuse within our system as peers. But wait, there's more. We've also dished it out. And so, one of the things that I have seen that's the most terrifying and disturbing as of late is peers being not accepting of each other, peers, who turn on one another because, if somebody has a mental health relapse and they're not who they are, I see in this community statewide, a turning away until that person, maybe can get better, and then maybe not even a judgment that comes. So as a peer, if I see a peer that's struggling and their character is not all together, and I tend to distance myself from them. I tend to do this and I do that. And I've seen everything in between. So what I want to talk about most effectively with peers in leadership is that regardless of where conflict comes from, and it comes from all sides. I've been on the, I call it what's that, the wall firing squad or something. I've been up against the wall from all sides. I have a daughter that's in a system that I've been heavily, judged for because of her unique challenges. It just goes on and on. As a peer, Kathy said something when she was introducing me, and I just love her for it. But she said, Dawn, for her recovery journey is a way of life. Is it perfect? No, it's definitely not perfect. And I won't let her tell you all those stories, but but our recovery it must, as a peer, encompass who we are. And that's how we become successful. I reach out today where when I had the first breakdown here in Arizona, I had over 900 contacts in my phone and couldn't call anybody. Poor Kathy on top of a mountain on a holiday had to drive me down. I was completely just broken, and she saved my life. And this is the thing. Until we can accept ourselves with all of our flaws and realize when we're overwhelmed and we need to reach out to others for help, until we can do that, we are not able to step into a leadership position. Now, what I mean by that is this: we don't have to be perfect. We come with all the, stuff, but what we do have to be willing to do is reach out and ask for help and communicate when we're not okay. What we have to be willing to do is stop looking without of ourselves and pointing those fingers at everybody else instead of ourselves. We have to be willing to hold ourselves accountable and allow at least one other person in our life to speak into our life and hold us accountable. Because if we don't, we're not fit for leadership. And this is why what we do when we lead impacts others that are following. And that's a big, big responsibility. I don't necessarily like it, but as a leader, I always have to think, oh, maybe that was a little too harsh. I have to own that and be accountable and say, hey, staff member, I'm sorry I said that to you that way. I didn't mean it that way. This is what I meant. And there's people that see that as weakness. But the truth is, as a peer in leadership, the number one way that you guard yourself and protect yourself is holding yourself accountable and allowing others to speak into your life. I've been on the phone in tears, in hysterical tears with Kathy. Lori's been on the phone with me when I've been like, I just don't even know. I'm so confused. These individuals speak into my life and help me find clarity in moments where I just can't find it on my own. If you're wanting or you are a leader and you are a peer and you have no one that you allow to hold you accountable, then you're missing a huge piece of the word leader. Leader isn't somebody that knows everything and is perfect and is the best at everything. A true leader thinks of people that they're helping and mentoring and says, how am I going to be the most effective? It doesn't matter if I'm a peer or a family member. How am I going to help impact this individual's life in such a way that they're going to grow past where I've been able to achieve? We want to see people going past where we've been able to go and continue to carry the torch of being peers and working in the system. I'm not sure. I can't really see if there's chat or if there's questions, but I'm just going to pause for a minute. I've said a lot, and I just want to make sure that one, my timing is good, and then if there's anything else.
So in chat, let me just see.
We don't have anything in chat right now.
But I'd like to add something here. In our statewide community, we have gotten a number of people that have reached very high levels of authority as peers. And yet when they've gotten there, they have not really fulfilled their job. And we have critical institutions that, you know, we have to have leadership. And yet that leadership has failed, and usually the boards don't want to remove the person or don't want to do anything because they're, quote, a peer, and this conflicts with the whole idea of recovery. And, you know, so they have not historically been removed, or they've been left, or, you know, it's been a difficult thing in our situation, in our community. So I just like to kind of open that up as, you know, what do you do when you have someone that just hasn't been well for a very, very long time and in leadership?
That's one of the hardest things, and I've been asked that several times, and I'll open it up to anybody else who wants to chime in. I know we have a lot of great leaders here, but one of the hardest things is when somebody is resistant to creating change and resistant to being held accountable. We cannot control the outcome of that. Let me explain this, okay? I always teach, when I teach, I talk about where control ends, right? And most of you who've heard me, you know I say our control ends at our skin, but there's power in numbers. And so what you did, Kathy, when you've experienced this in past, when you were in office and you saw this coming down the pike, I'm going to tell you what you did, and maybe that will help others. You gathered other strong peers together and got them on those type of councils or committees, and you fought to get them in there. And then what started happening was recovery outweighed the negativity or the sick, what I call sick behavior. And so it started kind of shifting where that person felt uncomfortable. Now, when people want to be sick and they want to be in control, there's power in numbers. Because what ends up happening is they start feeling uncomfortable. And in the average way, it takes about a year, maybe almost two. They end up vacating their positions, but it takes a while. And that's what you taught me. Is there any other comments from anybody else that wants to kind of take that on? Nope. Okay. Looks like we're moving back right away. Lori, can you give me a time check and let me know, is she still on? Did we lose
Yeah,
Lori?
I'm here. You're
Oh,
fine. It's
How much
10,
more time?
it's 10:40 and you've got till about 11:15.
Okay.
I'd like to rate
So-
another kind of situation, if I might. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I gotta kind of obscure some of the identification, but I've run up against groups, and mainly in northern Arizona, where they really won't let us in the sense that, you know, I mean, the coalition is one of the biggest groups that has peer and family representation, and yet they won't allow a peer to become, you know, in a high level of advisory or whatever. Maybe a family member, but not a peer, nor do they come to us and ask if we have a peer that we could recommend. And it makes it very, very difficult to get our culture across and to try to, you know, make social change, because my history with some of these groups is they'll allow peers to get together, but they control the group, they honcho the group. It isn't a peer run group. And so this is very difficult to penetrate for peers, and it's a disservice to our community. So, and it comes out of fear. So it's just something that we're gonna, you know, what can you do in a situation like that except for keep speaking up? And but the distress is just enormous.
It is. And I think one of the hardest things to do is change. You know, there's a thing called city or state type culture. Like in Detroit, there's a culture. And so in your northern Arizona, there's a culture. And it's very difficult to break through cultural boundaries because culture familiarity brings comfort, and change brings uncertainty, and fear for some people. So it's very, very pivotal that, you know, if there's a culture that is negative and not open and receiving others, again, there's that numbers equation. You did this in Maricopa County, Kathy. One second, Andrew, and I promise I'll get to you. In Maricopa County, there was a section that you faced, and it was very cultural. So what you started doing was inundating any public meetings with peers. You sent us to everything, girl. You sent us, you know, and there's like 15, 20 of us. And what we learned though is if we were, you know, holding signs and trying to kick down doors, we were ineffective. But what was effective was sheer numbers of hearing where they were coming back together at a later time as a group and solutioning those issues, and then going back very respectfully and being able to utilize our voice and say, you know, in our experience, this is kind of what, and it stepped. How long did it take you? It took you years.
Undermining, really undermining, is when these people go to like a peer that's a provider too. They don't represent our community. They do maybe a small section, but they're a provider. They're a business people. They cannot,
Yeah.
they will not speak up for us. And so
Right.
these people in place is so undermining and a slap in the face to do this to our
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. And I, you know, to some extent, I agree. And I think the problem has to be step by step using your strategy that you used to use here in Maricopa County, which was putting those people in key places. Here's the thing that I see in the North, and I'm not from there, but what I've seen is a lot of fear from members, from family members, even from staff at certain levels within agencies to take a stand. And so there has to be gatherings where these individuals can come together and you know, collectively start solutioning, where it's not done at, you know, with the individual who's resistant or the issue. It's got to be done privately amongst these groups of individuals and then recorded, and then, you know, put your most communicative peers in the front line. I see Andrew's hand, Kathy. I know it's not an end all be all. I know it's a process. I wanted to acknowledge what you were saying. I'm going to
Thank
move
you.
to Andrew and hear from him real quick. Okay. Okay.
And then we'll go to James after Andrew.
So yeah, I feel really great to be on this call. I try to get into these calls as much as I can because like there's just so much learning for me. As a person who's been involved in the mental health conversation since I was born, I was born into kind of the system with my parents in and out of institutions, all of that. It's refreshing to hear, this sort of advocacy coming from you all. And it feels really good that, I think that change comes from the bottom up, is what comes to me. And I, am a person who is navigating anxiety, depression, substance use. I used heroin with my dad. And what has worked for me is this recreational drumming and sound medicine. And I've taken that now and I've been able to go into institutions and share that. But there is a level of resistance that I've felt in institutional settings. And right now, I'm on the verge of working with the U of A on a research project. And you all sound like you've been on boards and you've listened to these things and you've advocated. And it sounds like, you're really like to the point where you've gone through the ringer. So I've kind of brought myself to this place where partnered with the U of A and the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine to study the effects of recreational drumming and sound medicine on substance use disorder, created a partnership with an organization locally. And there's always these things in the back of my head that are like, you're putting so much effort into working this, and it's taking a lot of time. It's a lot of writing. And maybe you could be out there doing the work, rather than working on making the work better. And I just wonder, from you, from the people that are here, how have you seen evidence-based research land? I mean, and I don't want to say that in a way that's going to be like, you're going to be like, oh no, you know what, it doesn't work. Nobody listens, because it's it's a little bit sounding like that. But I also, is it something that on these boards and on these legislative committees and stuff like that, does it really make a difference? Because I see what drumming does with the individuals that are dealing with substance use. I know what it's done in my life. I know there's tens of thousands of years of practice behind it. But what about these research papers? Is this an effort that is going to be valid for what you're talking about, which is changing, culture?
Does anybody want to respond to
Yeah,
that? I think he's asking the whole meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of us here who have been actively advocating, and the old saying, there's more than one way to get there. One size doesn't fit all. And with the leadership and peers in leadership, there are white papers, there are studies. I can't put my finger on any one particular to cite for you to go to for evidence base. But yes, it is effective. Yes, it takes time and it takes persistence and patience. It's the alternative modes, everything. We're finding the more we can raise the consciousness and get the information out there, the better. With the coalition and our work with legislators, the Mental Health Day at the Capitol coming up, there are a lot of means, a lot of pathways to follow to succeed in this. So when, and I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm trying to bring it back to the topic for today with peers in leadership. And there are challenges, will continue to be challenges. There have been a lot of successes. There are people that are a peer family member, find themselves in a position, don't maximize on it because they are under the thumb of the organization that they work for. I've seen this.
Well, thank you, Lori, for sharing, trying to take a stab at this. But what I'm asking you is it's, it does sound like you understand the language of institutional healthcare in the way that you referenced a white paper. As there's a dialogue on the street, right? I had to learn how to cop dope, and there's a dialogue inside of the institution. And what I'm finding is that these institutional folks, they speak research. And, as a peer, right, it's like, how do I learn to navigate that sort of tool set, that sort of dialect in creating opportunities to influence, models?
I
So,
can
yeah,
I can
yeah,
answer that if you don't mind, Andrew, because I think and just real quick, and then we'll get to the next person, Andrew, okay? And I'm gonna
yeah,
put my email in the chat for you if you want to discuss further.
yeah, I would love
I
to.
think as a peer, I think part of the challenge is that peer services are evidence-based and have been from SAMHSA. What's not yet occurred is that up, line into leadership as a fidelity model that can be called evidence-based practice. And so I think what needs to happen, you said, how can you find information about that? I think going on SAMHSA's website, I think they validate and have a lot of different fidelity models, but from my opinion is that this type of model for peers in leadership influencing, larger boards and communities, in my opinion, it has to be established. It's not established yet. And so what we have to do is take the foundational information that we already know, which is the credentialed peer support services, and base off of that someone that has started out at that level, where they've gone and how effective they are in those places that they've sat. I'm
Yeah.
gonna end
So
it there,
what I
Andrew.
got just one quick comment, Don. So what I was saying is that I'm a peer and I'm working with the U of A. I'm working with the U of A to
Yeah.
research the protocol I've developed. And
Oh,
I
okay.
was saying on the board level where you guys are talking about influencing, do you talk about evidence-based in
Oh,
association
yeah.
with, okay, all right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We talk about evidence-based, but if you're working with ASU right now,
You bet.
that's exciting work. Looking forward
U
to
of A,
seeing you.
U of A,
Oh,
the
U
Andrew
of
Weil
A.
Center for,
Okay.
yeah, the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine, the first integrative medicine school in the United States, on a
That's awesome.
peer-led intervention that utilizes recreational drumming. That's where I'm at.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see that. So I'm gonna put my email in the chat because I want to hear more from you if you don't mind.
Yeah. And thank you
Lori,
Awesome.
for
who
the
Yeah.
did you
clarification.
have?
Yeah, so in chat we have, and this goes back a while earlier in the conversation, Dawn, you stated regardless of where conflict comes from. And then it went on and it says, I didn't catch the rest of that thought. Would you be able to finish that, please? I was taking notes. So where you,
Oh, yeah.
regardless of where conflict come from.
Yeah. And I think where I was at was that I was talking about conflict coming from, individuals who are not peers, from agencies, from peers, regardless of where conflict comes from and judgment. If you are not centered in your own recovery journey, it will affect you and it could take you off your mission. And so I get pulled left and right, and believe me, in just common everyday things. What helps me is if I'm willing to follow a practice and adhere to a practice, and also be vulnerable with people that I trust. So we use in OIFA, one of our biggest tools is that we use our lived experience story to help others identify us as people that have walked the walk and talked the talk. But we could use our story and tell everybody our whole story, and and maybe we don't know if they're trustworthy. I share my story in a public way because I know that somebody, at least one person on that call, it will help. But when we're in relationship with others and we're trying to find somebody to help us through our journey, we need to be aware of where they are in their journey. We need to see who they are in their personal relationships. We need to know if we can trust that they're solid enough to be leading me. Because we'll both go off the cliff. You know what I mean? And so we've got to make sure. So here's what I want to do for this last segment. I want to ask everybody to participate in kind of a question and answer process here. And I can't see everybody because I'm going to try to change my view so I could see gallery view.
Dawn,
And that's
while you're
better.
doing that, Dawn, I'm just going to read something in chat while you're doing that.
Sure.
The participant says, part of my experience has been changing or working for a changed definition of evidence-based. For example, there's an expanded definition that includes community-based evidence that starts to recognize culturally based practices. The challenge is who gets to set those definitions and determine what's accepted as evidence-based when evidence-based systems are more commonly rooted in Western Eurocentric research that excludes communities of color.
Yeah. And so, that's a really good point. And I think part of the process is going to the demographical areas that you're looking at. I think it's really hard to be, in one area and really working to find fidelity and evidence-based processes in a completely different demographic, which it shouldn't be, but it is. I mean, that's the truth. And so I think working to expand your research base, may help. But I'm not an expert in that area, so I hope I helped answer that. Okay, so what I want to do is do a question and answer session. And I'm going to ask everybody in some way to participate, either raise the fake hand on, that's in here in Zoom, or raise your own hand to answer yes. If it's a no, then don't worry about anything. Thumbs up, fake hand, heart, whatever, any kind of icon that you want to participate. So how many of you are willing to stand in a room with someone who has authority over you and tell them your worst secret about yourself? I can't see the whole screen. Can Kathy, Lori help me? Is there
Nobody
anybody?
is raising their hands. We have one emoji with the laughing with tears.
Yeah,
So
I know that's Tavo. I know that's Tavo. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to ask another question. How many of you are willing to stand in a room with a person of authority and share somebody else's worst secret that they confided in you about?
I will say that I do that anonymously, not identifying the person, as a part of advocating for folks that I work
Okay. So first question was about us. Second question was about somebody else. Both happen every day, depending on our comfort level with the individual that we're at. So one is harmful behavior and one can be productive behavior. Okay, it can be, but we have to define those. All right, as peers, oftentimes we will know people who maybe they're in fear for us and they will reach out and tell somebody else very private things or harmful things about us that they know. And we have to understand as peers, one, is this a helping action? Is somebody trying to help save my life? Save the life of my loved one? This is part of becoming a leader. When you think about somebody's motivation of what their action is, that will help you understand how to process information in leading others. I don't know how many times I've been in a position where I've had a staff member say, I can't believe you wouldn't have my back about that. So what? I wasn't working for 5 hours. I needed downtime and I went to the grocery store and I saw a movie and, and so what if the company was paying me 5 hours and I lied to everybody about it? You're a peer. You're supposed to have my back. No, no, that's not part of a true recovery journey. I'm not obligated to co-sign your dishonesty because you're a peer and I'm a peer. Family members. Family members telling other family members. It's one thing to share information in a support group that you're getting help with, and it's a completely different thing to call a family member down the road and say, girl, let me tell you something. This lady's daughter. Okay, thank you, Kara. So, what I'm trying to say, as peers and leaders, we have to, one, I'm going to review, be willing to grow through the process. We've got to be willing to stay growing always. My identity and my process is not going to be yours. Tavo's identity and his process is not going to be somebody else's. I don't care if he has a twin and his twin decides to go through becoming a family member that's trained as a credentialed family support. So they're both go through the same training, same day. It's going to be different. And the reason is that we're all, and I know you guys have heard this, but this is the truth, we're all unique individuals. So our processes are different. If you really want to be a peer leader or you have an opportunity to be a peer leader, it takes more than all the outside work. We can keep ourselves busy with the outside work and we can get degreed and we can partner with the biggest of the best of the biggest. Okay? But we've got to do the inside pieces. And then we partner ourselves with people that are also doing the inside pieces, that we see are doing the inside pieces. And their pieces are not going to look the same as my pieces. But the most important thing in becoming a peer leader is being willing to do that. Being willing to have these people. I don't know if everybody can handle having a Kathy call you out on stuff all the time, but you should certainly have someone either like Lori or Kathy or both, where when you're growing, you're able to call that friend and say, I'm not sure about this. I don't know if I want this. Yes, Kathy.
Well, I have a tendency to be a little paranoid or a lot of times doubt people's intention or ascribe the wrong thing to them. And it's just my nature, I guess. But what I always do, and I just don't make decisions on my own. Some people think I'm so fantastic with my decisions. I have gone to so many people and called them about each and every decision to get feedback, and to really get a better perspective of things. Because a lot of times when you're immersed in this, you can't pull back.
Right. That's so true.
So, and we've heard a lot about the challenges, and one of the things you said, Dawn, was about peers working in the system that aren't supporting each other.
Mhm.
And what would you say about peers working in the system that are supporting each other?
Well, I think I alluded to it, Lori, when I said there's nothing like that community when you come in and you begin to support one another and there's a community that's formed and there's bonds that are formed. I still have relationships with people from when I first moved to Arizona, and I met them, and it's so important. Those bonds are very, very important. And so I think for purposes of this call, I'm going to ask my second set of questions. And there's two questions that I want to ask. One is, would you ever trust a leader that you're accountable to with information about your loved ones. Negative information about, like, let's say your circle family. Yes, okay.
So we've got one
Yes, I
thumbs
see
up
one.
on that.
Okay. And so then, as an individual who's growing, would you ever trust a credentialed family support or peer support with something that could be devastating about your family?
I've got a thumbs up, one thumbs up on that.
2 thumbs up. Okay.
2.
Okay. 3. I see 3. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So then 4. Okay. So why would we trust an individual that's been trained as a credentialed family support or peer support, but not necessarily trust a leader that we're accountable to with derogatory information? Any ideas? Yes,
I'll
Tavo.
jump in. Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh.
Tavo. I just wanted
So
no, go ahead, Tavo, go ahead.
go, Nicole. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Just thinking, I answered yes to both, but I would be much more selective with the leader depending on our relationship. And I think there would be circumstances where you would almost have to tell a leader what was going on in your life, depending on your job
Sure,
situation
yeah.
and if that took away. The peer, however, and or family support, much looser definition of wanting to share with them because there's a shared understanding of I'm going to tell you something, it's going to feel really vulnerable and really scary. And most people would judge me, but I trust because you've also been in my shoes that you won't judge me and that you'll have a different approach than a leader would.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Is that what you were
So
going to say, Tavo?
I think that she got my answer. At the end of the day, the second one, the peer, it's a commitment. It's a trust that is between to each other, not only as a family support partner or peer support, but as a human being. I'm committed to you, and I've been in your shoes in some capacity, not exactly in my life, but in some capacity, being in your shoes. The other is a leader that you trust, a leader that has knowledge and experience. Not always is going to be there committed. It's really good. So first of all, before I just finish, a quick comment. It's delightful, the training that you're giving and the sharing. Don, thank you so much. You're doing a fantastic job. I see myself how I am a family member. I've been a peer and support and co-worker, but now as a CEO of Reach, I'm a
That's
leader.
it.
And how can I combine both? How can I continue being a peer support for somebody that trusts me? How can I continue navigate for the people that they have nobody in their life? But at the end of the day, now I'm the leader of the agency. How can I do this because it's a business? But the question before that you said, I really like it. Like, I'm not committed to your dishonest, is what you said. And it's one of the things that I have in our agency. We are a peer. We're here. You can trust me. As soon as I don't break the boundaries of integrity and honesty, that is my number one thing, not only as a peer, but as a leader in my agency. I think that I'm extremely committed that our staff members, they are honest with the people that we are serving. And we have quite a few stories that some participants, some clients, we don't have clients, but they said, I'm gonna tell you something, but don't tell nobody. Hold it. You're telling me that I need to be dishonest and I don't have doing that. I'm not committed to that. I'm committed to your growth, but I'm not committed to that. So I think that it's a very, that's why I don't know if I raised my hand in the first one, but it's a combination for both when you see yourself in those different areas.
Thank you. And I love your answer. And I love you, Tavo, appropriately. And so part of the reason I'm asking these questions, the way that I'm asking them is to provoke thought within you with who you are as an individual. how are you going to navigate these answers? You know, am I open to leadership that's not peer or family based? Do I need to be? Sometimes, you know, it's all about relationship, right? It's all about knowing the person. And I go back to exactly what I was saying from the beginning is I would not share personally one-on-one stuff unless I know that person's, you know, solid, you know, able to support and make decisions. And one of the things that I love about Tavo, he said, you know, I'm not sure because it needs to, you know, fit. Max said, you know, if the leader, you know, there's circumstances where I would share. So here's my last set of questions.
Dawn, 1 second, in chat on this same question, we have, which ties into what you've been saying. Due to the context of sharing, it doesn't appear as appropriate to share with the leader versus the supporter.
That's true. Now, I got to tell you, I have had the same supervisors for years now. My supervisor is one of the first people I go to. If it's about work stuff, maybe if it's not about work stuff, but it might affect work stuff. And so, but she's earned that trust over time. So I totally agree with whoever put that in the chat. I think the key to every question that I've asked so far is that it's relational and it's showing who they are, whether they're credentialed or not. But I got to say, before I ask these last two questions, to me, when an individual goes through credentialing doesn't automatically qualify them as a safe place for me.
Yes.
Okay. I still want to see you. Okay. I still need to see who you are. Okay. Okay. So here's my last set of questions. Is there something within yourself that hands down, no matter what happens, you will not share with a peer, family member, or leader that you've just met within the last 6 months? Hands down, will not share, no matter what. So let's see hands. Hands, thumbs up, smiley faces, crying, whatever. Gotcha, Tava. Any response? Is there something so private, hands down, you will not share
Got
with
one
the
thumbs
peer?
up.
Okay. We got one,
Two
two.
thumbs up.
Okay. With a peer, a family member that's certified, or a leader. So no responses are, no, there's nothing really I would share. Oops, sorry. Hold on a second. I would share. Right? Everybody other than a couple people are basically saying there's nothing that is too secret.
Well, you know something, Don, I just got to share that what I've learned is in our community and everywhere you work, alliances shift and people get mad at you. And one, you share things with your best friend, and all of a sudden they're not your best friend and they're spilling the beans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, here's the second part of that question. If there was nothing that you would safeguard, where are you on your recovery journey of identifying inward work that needs to be done?
You trapped us.
And this is why nobody has to answer really. What it is that when we're working our own walk, I don't know, can you guys see it? I hurt my back moving. I'm sorry. I'm in pain. When we're really walking our own walk, We are always identifying areas that we need to grow in. And sometimes those areas need to remain private. Okay? At least for a while. You remember I said that you've known only 6 months, right? So sometimes those areas are the most challenging to remain private. As human beings, we want people to acknowledge we're okay and that the work we're doing and preparing to become a leader, we're okay. And we love that voice of affirmation. Oh, that's not that bad, girl. That's not that bad, dude. You're fine. I mean, I've known worse, right? It's okay. So then it's like, whew, okay. If somebody else thinks it's okay, it must be okay. But I'm challenging you today as peers and family members, whatever your walk is, whatever your journey is to sit with yourself sometimes. Sit with yourself and challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to get to know those places in you and accept them. And if there's changes that need to be made, trust yourself, trust those that have invested in your life. As long as you're seeing them do the same thing, as long as you're seeing them willing to grow, I don't care how old they are or how young they are. If you're seeing a willingness to grow and an honesty, trust yourself, sit with yourself for a little while, and then if you need help, reach out. But every one of us, everyone that is a credentialed peer support or family support should have the right to decide if they want to step into leadership. And if they do, they should have our full support if they're ready. And if they're not ready yet, they should have our support in growing and walking alongside them with that journey. And that's really what I wanted to leave you all with. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate everyone listening.
Does anyone have any questions for Dawn or comments on this topic?
Hey, Dawn.
Tavo has a, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Tavo and I are jumping over each other again. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll let you go. Now it's my turn. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Just wanted to say, Dawn, thank you for being vulnerable and open with us and for sharing your experience. I think that we're all leaders and can be leaders in our positions, even if they are not officially leader positions, right? And something that I really love about OIFA and my role here is that it is not only required, but I expect myself to be vulnerable when I meet with people who are struggling in a way that is compassionate and very different from other roles I've had in jobs. And it's something I value so immensely because at the end of the day, we are all human. We all have these struggles. And I really hate how in workplace settings, you're taught this idea of like, well, whatever you have going on at home, you just need to leave it at the door. Well, that's wildly unrealistic, right? And for somebody like me who you know exactly what's going on in my head at all times, problematic. So I guess appreciate the challenge to lead with vulnerability and to let that be seen as a strength rather than something that is often shunned in a workplace. I think that's where OIFA is really pushing back against traditional work culture. So thanks for challenging us.
Tavo?
Thank you. So once again, Ms. McKenzie, still my answer. It's exactly what I was planning to say. So, but I just wanna really quick. I think that one of the words that you guys say is vulnerable, and And I just want to share really quick. Last month, we got a peer that shared something, how rich family service impact her life. And then I was training our staff members about something. So at the end of the meeting, Tavo cries. And that's not often that people see, not even my wife. I always am the strong, or I have the wrong concept that I'm a leader, and the leaders, we don't cry. Leaders, we're vulnerable. And what's surprising that one of the staff members said, I never seen our CEO crying. And I clarified and I said, you didn't see your CEO crying. You see your peer, your co-worker, your family members, your community member that has emotions, that I can break the macho pattern of a Mexican culture and show people that I'm a human being, that I have sensitive feelings about anything. So I think that Don this morning is pushing me to continue not be a CEO or a leader, but to be a peer that I need to be sensitive with others, but I need to be honest with myself, to be vulnerable with the people. So I want to thank Don for your honesty and trusting this group of people. And of course, I want to thank Kathy and Lori for their leadership to put this type of presentation together. So it's been really delightful. Thank you so much that I have one more gas and one more push for me to continue, again, not as a CEO, but as a member, as a peer, that I can say, oh, we are in the right field and we are making difference with the people that we serve. Thank you, Don. Well done job.
Thank you. And now, Kathy, I'll let you thank Don.
Well, Don Tavo, just, he said it. He said it all. That's exactly why we do what we're doing. And thank you. You've kept me on the straight and narrow somewhat, but I highly value, you're one of the people that I go to, and this just illustrates the importance as we've gone through our journey. So I hope others have gotten as much out of this conversation as I have. And if we've only reached one person, we reached the rest of mankind. So thank you.